in the establishment of conservation biology. He initiated the idea and planning with B.A. Wilcox in 1978 for the first international conference on research and conservation biology that was held in La Jolla. He's on so many boards, and he writes op-eds for the New York Times and also international, what used to be the International Herald Tribune, which is now the International New York Times. I always was pleased to, when I was traveling, to pick up the International Herald Tribune and then read something very nice on the op-ed page by Tom. Tom predicted in 1980 that 10 to 20% of all species on Earth would have gone extinct by the year 2020. Unfortunately, we're on our way to making his prediction true. That's a sad part of it. Other awards that Tom has received are the California Tyler Prize for Environmental Achievement. He also has a very interesting organism named after him. It's a parasite on butterfly larvae discovered on the Pacific slope of the Talamanca mountain range in Costa Rica by Ronald Zanaga, who's a specialist in bees, wasps, and ants at the National Biodiversity Institute in Bio. Now, I would like to look at it a little differently, that Tom has been recognized in a beautiful way of a wasp that flies on the back of a butterfly, because I can imagine Tom as being pleased to be with the butterflies, especially those of Mexico, and to be part of that wonderful migration of butterflies. Now, Tom has been awarded the Blue Planet Prize for being the first scientist to academically clarify how humans are causing habitat fragmentation and pushing biological diversity to its crisis. And last year, he was selected as a U.S. Science Envoy by the United States State Department as one of President Obama's science envoys. But I think the best of all is to tell you about Camp 41. Tom, for the last 50 years, has been working in the Amazon and in the tropics, and he has this wonderful camp that a whole bunch of people have been invited, and I was one of them. Learning to sleep in a hammock is a new experience, and tromping through the Amazon forests and climbing to I think it's a 300-foot tower to observe above the canopy the birds, because Tom has trained as an ornithologist. That was one of the best experiences, and if you get invited to Camp 41, please don't turn it down. It's a wonderful, wonderful experience. Tom, please come up so I may give you this award.
So obviously it's an enormous honor to be recognized in this way. And there's no better way to measure that than to look at all the previous recipients, including Rita Caldwell. And I intend to emulate Rita. This may be a Lifetime Achievement Award, but it's only my down payment to earn that. So I will keep busy on these issues. I also wanted to tip my hat to one of the other previous Lifetime Achievement recognizees, namely Ruth Patrick, who in 1947 published an incredibly important paper demonstrating that the number and kinds of species in streams and rivers in the mid-Atlantic, which is where she did the field work, reflect not only the natural physics, chemistry, geology, and biology of those ecosystems, but also reflects the stresses of human activity in the watershed. And basically what Ruth proved in what I refer to as the Patrick Principle is that biological diversity integrates all environmental stresses. And so there is no better way to measure our collective impact on the environment than to look at what is happening to biodiversity in a particular place, or indeed summed up locally. And that's why biodiversity conservation is so hard, because basically you have to solve everything, not just the direct things like habitat fragmentation. So these are challenging times, to say the least. But I want to remind you of a few things as we take on the challenges that are happening almost daily now. One is that conservation and environment are still a thoughtful conservative's issues. And for those of you too young to remember, basically the modern environmental laws and institutions in this country all came under Nixon and Ford. So while the Republicans at the moment may seem this monolithic, force against the environment, in fact, amongst them there will be some of these thoughtful conservatives. And as we experience what I think of as daily body blows, let's remember this is still a participatory democracy. And we really should use democracy to shape a better outcome. We need to look for those opportunities to work across the aisle. And interestingly, of the 21 senators I've taken to the Amazon, more than half actually were Republicans. And there's plenty to be done at the state level. But that's not enough in a sense. And we all, I think, were quite taken with Saturday's march, not just in Washington and not just in many places in the United States, but in fact around the world. And we also should be remembering that the impact of that march is not just at 1600 Pennsylvania, it's also on every member of the Congress. And I think we're going to need to do the same kind of thing, maybe even at a greater scale for climate change. But lastly, I couldn't resist telling you the story of another recipient, Ed Wilson, when he was brought in the George H.W. Bush administration to meet with the science advisor and John Sununu, the chief of staff, to talk about the Endangered Species Act. And when Sununu discovered that Ed Wilson thought all species should be saved, that was sort of the end of the conversation. But, he endeavored to be polite. He said, well, we'll have another meeting, which of course we never did. And then his throwaway line was, he said, I suppose the devil is in the details. No, sir, said Professor Wilson, God is in the details. Thank you very much.